This is Gary DeMar. I'm the host of American Vision's Vantage Point, and we will be discussing part 2 of Gary North's discussion of Wayne Grudem's book, Politics According to the Bible.
Vantage Point is brought to you by American Vision. For more information on today's show, check out God and Government, the 3-volume series by Gary DeMar. You will find it at AmericanVision.com.
Welcome to American Vision's Vantage Point. I'm Gary DeMar, and on my left is Dr. Gary North, and we are continuing our series of shows dealing with Wayne Grudem's new book, Politics According to the Bible, published by Zondervan. As in previous sessions relating to this particular book, I have to commend Dr. Grudem for at least taking on the topic, and we're not being totally critical of everything he's doing here. At least somebody in the evangelical world takes politics seriously enough that they want to appeal to the Bible to do so. The question is, in this initial start to do that, how adequate is his presentation of these issues from a biblical perspective? And Dr. North, in the previous talk, you mentioned 1 Samuel chapter 8, which is really a pivotal passage, and it gives some indication of where we are today. You mentioned that Dr. Grudem really doesn't lay out for us, okay, if 10% is a mark of tyranny in the Old Testament, actually competing with the tithe, 10%, and Americans aren't fazed by that today, where does he then go? What is his chapter on economics all about? What helpful exegesis does he give? Is there an exegetical basis for his comments on economics?
Well, that raises the real issue, and this is the problem that we've had with so many of these books that date back certainly 40 years in some cases. That you'll see a book about the Bible and you go and you read about the Bible and there's a little bit of Bible, and there's a whole lot of and there's no link. And so the author exposits whatever he likes, and he quotes a couple of Bible verses for which he provides no detailed exegesis and no footnotes to anybody who has provided the exegesis, and then he says, now let me tell you what I like. Now, in convincing somebody to buy something, you have to answer 2 questions that always come up. And the first one is, so what? And the second one is, who says?
Right.
Now, in politics, you've got basically 8 words, and they're essentially derivatives or extensions of that. You have the so what. That's the first answer. Now, the second one is, says you.
Yeah, what made you the authority?
Yeah. And the third one is, make me. And the fourth one is, get lost. Those are the 8 words of politics. And you have to have a response, an organized, systematic, philosophically grounded, practically applied response to so what, says you, and of course the obvious one, make me, and then get lost. Now the modern world, and by modern world I mean everything since about 1700, has taken those 4 positions with respect to the Bible and has come to those conclusions in each case. It has always been, at some point, the final 2 words, get lost. Because if you can't make me, that is, if you can't bring voters into the marketplace to affect the survival of certain political candidates, the candidate says, get lost. I have to go deal with some voting group that can reelect me and that is a threat to me. And so I don't have to worry about. So if you come in the name of the Bible, you're already to the stage of says you. And if you say, well, the Bible says it, they may listen if they think enough voters are going to listen. But if it's just, well, I think this is how the Bible really means it, then at that point it's make me. And if you don't have the votes, you're not going to listen.
Now, today we got people like David Ramsey, we had Larry Burkett, we have a number of Crown Ministries. There are a lot of these ministries out there that do in fact appeal to the Bible,
yes,
make a good case for their programs related to the Bible and getting debt reduction and savings and retirement and all that sort of thing. But and if you listen to a lot of, at least I listen to Dave Ramsey, a lot of this does translate over into the political realm, but there seems to be a wall. They want to go so far, but no further with it.
That's right. Now, let me give some examples from the book. Your difficulty in making a biblical case always stems from the problem that there's resistance to biblical truth. So you had better be really grounded in this. And you'd better have a constituency that believes the Bible, because it always gets to make me. And so you want to be able to say, this is what the Bible says, this is not what I am saying, I am coming in the name of a higher authority, which the Scriptures represent the highest authority. So here is what he says. You want to have a concept of civil government. Here is what he says. Civil rulers are a, quote, terror to bad conduct. Now he's quoting from the passage in Romans 13 from Paul, which means they restrain evil by the threat of punishment for wrongdoing. This is consistent with what is taught in Genesis 9, 5 through 6. That is exactly correct. That is what Paul is saying, and it is consistent with Genesis 9, the sections on the sanctions. Then he gets to the next point. They give, quote, approval, unquote, or praise to those who do what is good. Verse 3, in addition, the ruler is God's servant for your good. These verses indicate that government has a role in promoting the common good of a society. It should only punish wrongdoing, not only punish wrongdoing, but also encourage and reward good conduct that contributes to the good of society. Now, all of a sudden, he has moved not just a little step, he has offered a completely revolutionary, modern, humanist, and yet at the same time, Greek humanist view of the state. That is, the state is to produce good. And the moment you move from the civil government producing good, you have moved into the realm, the ancient city-state, which is a salvation-oriented institution. It heals people. The moment you get to the state doing good, you've adopted a messianic state. It's a healer. Now he goes on and applies it. Some examples of government supporting the common good would include tax-supported playgrounds and parks where families can picnic and sports teams can practice and compete. Now, all of a sudden,
that is really a big leap.
Not only is it a big leap, it is a silly leap. Now, if you go later in the book, he has some comments about what has taken place this year in healthcare. And he says, quote, in addition, the Democratic majority in Congress in early 2010 passed legislation that gives the federal government significant control of the nation's health care system, which comprises approximately 17.6% of the nation's gross domestic product. The bill calls for large segments of the American economy to be taken over by the federal government and essentially become owned by the government rather than by shareholders or private individuals. That is correct. Now here's the position he's saying. First, he moves to the state as essentially a healing institution, but he's limiting it to picnics and sports teams. Now, all right, let's go to the next stage. How about cities appropriating money for professional sports teams at $1 billion or $2 billion? How about that? Well, it's certainly sports teams, and people can go to it. Then the liberal comes along and says, now wait a minute, let me get this clear. You say we can have picnics in the park with government money, but when it comes to saving babies' lives, of broken people brought in off the street who have no health care, then you're saying the state's not to do that, but you can do sports teams at the park. Well, it's ludicrous. At that point, they've got you. Because they're going to say, look, we got the threat of dead and crippled babies, and you're saying we can have sports in the park at taxpayer expense. So why don't you want to go down the next road? Well, the answer to it is this is not efficient. Now we're into pragmatism. It's not a philosophical matter. Got nothing with the Bible. And what the Bible says about politics, it's an argument over who's got the votes. It's an argument over make me. They got the votes, we're going to make you. You're going to accept this because we had the votes in Congress at a particular time. And once we have the votes and the program is in place, you will never, ever get rid of that program. So he moves into the health care without a philosophical foundation to resist it. He says, this is in chapter 9 on page 269, I believe that government should, he underlines it, should promote economic growth in a nation. This is because one of the primary responsibilities of government is to act as God's servant to do good for the citizens of a nation. See Romans 13:4. Or, in the words of the U.S. Constitution, to promote the general welfare of a nation. Okay? Why is the Constitution promoting the general welfare? Why does that come out of Romans 13? It doesn't. It comes out of Aristotle. It doesn't come out of Romans 13. The founding fathers went back to a concept of the polis, the Greek polis, which was an agent of salvation. And they adopted the whole concept of the general welfare out of that Greek background. So once you're moving down to what I would call the slippery slope. Once you say that the state is an agency of positive sanctions to take money from one group who really don't like the parks and don't care anything about sports teams, and give that to another group that says, boy, we really like parks and sports teams, you're into the welfare redistribution issue. And he can say, well, it shouldn't be too much. Don't make it too much. Make it just a little bit. It's Goldilocks politics. Not too little, not too much, just right. Well, the trouble is in politics, we find that the ones who want a whole lot more and have got the votes for it get those programs put into practice.
Yeah, because there is no limiting. There's nothing limiting in the Bible. Once you determine that the state ought to do good in a proactive way, there's nothing in the Bible that says you can limit that. Unless I guess you go back to the 10%. If we can't do it within that 10%,
that's right.
Then we shouldn't do it.
And of course, the scriptures don't have any of the 10%. You don't have a welfare state described in the scriptures. You don't have the civil government going down and getting money or goods from one group to distribute those goods through political channels into somebody else's pocket. This kind of wealth redistribution is not found in the Mosaic Law. It's not certainly found in the New Testament, because in the New Testament they're talking about voluntary charity. Now, Grudem knows this. His problem is he is importing a Greek view of the state, and he's baptizing it with a peculiar phrase in Romans about a ruler praising good men. He goes from a ruler praising good men to parks. And the moment you go to parks,
you open the gate for everything.
The gate is open.
Well, on our next show, we're going to deal a little bit more with Wayne Grudem's book with Dr. Gary North.
For more information on today's show, check out God and Government. In this 3-book series, Gary DeMar introduces you to America's true history, discussing the influence of Christianity upon the founding and development of America. He presents a practical approach to developing a biblical perspective of the elements of society, challenging us to re-implement the values and priorities that made America great. Its factual documentation makes it ideal for Christians seeking to discover the truth of America's heritage. You will find this great work at AmericanVision.com.